Here with me is a Polo GTI. This car has lived in the shadow of a Golf GTI for the better part of its entire life. But in a market like today, where GTI Golfs are worth well over 30 grand for any clean example, Polo GTI actually shines above the Golf. And that's because of the price. This example I have with me was only $19,000 with under 100,000 kilometers and is a 2016 Mark 7. And I'm going to show you why I personally think this might be a better example than buying a Golf. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'll be the first one to admit I think the normal Polo is a bit of a shitbox. But these GTIs are actually quite impressive. And that's because not only of how it performs, but how it looks. It takes away that economy look the Polo usually has. And it starts with the front end. It has this red stripe that goes all the way through the headlights, GTI badge, honeycomb grille, and a much more aggressive front looking bumper. With 17-inch alloy wheels and bigger brakes, these ones are also wrapped in Michelin Pilot Sport 4s, it actually makes for a really fun driving experience. Being the GTI as well, it sits 15mm lower than a standard Polo. That helps with the stance of the car, and the suspension's a little sportier as well, which again makes it a lot more fun to drive. I think matched with these wheels and the stance, it actually looks alright. Am I allowed to say that about a Polo? Coming to the back, this Polo has a very discreet spoiler, a GTI badge, and actually a lack of Polo badge for the Mark 7. Along with that, it has a twin tailpipe as well for the exhaust. And that exhaust actually has a decent rumble to it. Now, I must be honest, my entire life I've been surrounded by Golfs. I owned a Jetta for a while as well. My mum had a Mark 7 Golf R as well. So I'm very, very familiar with this interior. It comes to no surprise to me. Matter of fact, you might even say I'm biased towards liking this car. But I reckon anyone you ask in the car community will say these seats are one of the best standard seats that you can buy in a car ever. I absolutely love this Golf pattern. It's straight from a Golf and it looks amazing. Not only that, these seats grab me in ways I've never been grabbed before. And not only is that just generally comfortable, if you're a skinny guy, if you're a fat guy, work it out. But for other people, this is actually really nice. But not only that, when you're actually putting this DSG 1.8 to work, these things really do hold you in place. And when you mix that with some actual grippy Michelin Pilot Sport 4 tyres, you can really have a good driving experience, and not just on the freeway. But if you want to take this around corners, or if you really want to take it to a track, these seats will have you covered. It's not an area where you'd have to invest money in to make it better. In a 2016 Mark 7, this actually comes with Apple CarPlay as standard, and it works really well. Not only that, it has a lot of different features on it, like your normal AM, FM radio, media for your phone, voice control to answer phone calls and stuff like that. It comes with some other features you'd expect from a car of this year, traction control, start-stop for your car. Personally, I hate those things. And then things like it's got parking sensors and a proper reverse camera. And then sport mode, which what I found in sport mode just holds the gear for a bit longer. I'm not sure if it stiffens up the suspension or stiffens up me, but I noticed that too. And it keeps the RPM a bit higher as well on the idle. As far as climate control is concerned, it has auto climate control. Now, I've only owned one car with auto climate control, and that was my Jetta. And let me say, after owning an auto climate control, it's really hard to go back to manual climate control. Below that is your DSG gearbox. This is the standard park, reverse, neutral, and then drive, and then you can put it in sport mode. I absolutely love DSGs. You probably know all about them. It's a 7-speed, meaning the RPM is really low on the freeway, and it's got plenty of gears to row through, and it helps with the acceleration a lot because there's so many gears. They're all a lot shorter, rather if it was a 4 or 5 or 6 speed, which I really like. This comes with part of the car I absolutely hate, and this is obviously a Polo thing. Here's your center armrest. Nice, it's got a nice storage for a few condoms. Only issue is, below that is your handbrake in a very nice, convenient spot. I really like Golf GTI steering wheels because it comes with a flat bottom, which makes it feel more sporty. It has GTI with some shiny metal around it, and is wrapped in a nice leather with red stitching. This red stitching can be found all throughout the car as well, along the seats, the gear shifter, and of course the steering wheel. And all the lights inside the car are also red around the dash and gauge cluster. Now, you are reminded of it as a Polo in some areas. Red Golf might have soft touch plastic, this has hard, scratchy plastic. To me, I don't really give a shit about things like that, but I think some people do, and it's worth the mention. All around here is hard, scratchy plastic, and that's just where it cheaps out. You know, you have manual seats instead of automatic seats, you know, electric ones, they're all done by hand. But to be honest, I couldn't really give a shit about stuff like that. If that's where I'm saving my $11,000 on aftermarket value, I'm happy with it. In front of me is a gauge cluster. Again, it's in red, which I think is pretty cool. This car revs at 7,000 RPM, It goes up to 280 kilometers an hour on this tacho. If you're taking a Polo to 280 kilometers an hour, I'll give you a firm handshake and some other things. Other than that, between those two is a little screen. This tells you basic features like your fuel economy, the oil pressure, the average speed, all that usual stuff. It's actually quite handy. On the other side of the steering wheel is your stuff for the radio. So if you don't want to have to mess around with knobs and you'd rather buttons, no worries, you can do that on the steering wheel. Along with that, you can also answer phones with this as well and control your Apple CarPlay, which is some nice modern features. In general though, this car is actually fairly spacious. The steering wheel is very adjustable. It goes up and down, in and out, which I really like. The seats are very comfortable and very spacious. Obviously I love this space, but in general, you'd think a Polo is a small car. Once you're inside of it, it doesn't really feel that small. Oh, all right, the back seats. Wow, these are actually really comfortable. The seat is adjusted to my height. I'm 5'9", I think. And I think that's average for a man, I hope as well. And as you can see, plenty of knee room. That's because these seats have cutouts here, which makes it better. Headroom, plenty. There's not much to do back here. We've got a cup holder, which is kind of cool. But you know what? You're probably not going to fit another person here. But as far as two people, it's all right. And these seats kind of have a bit of like structure here. I don't know if that's kind of to mimic the front seats being buckety, but you get that nice golf pattern as well on them. So it's nice to say they didn't cheap out too much back here. The boot. Now, it's a Polo. You can't expect too much, but for what it is fairly big. You know, you could fit all your groceries in it, because I know most of you are probably mums watching this. And for what it is, I think it's all right. If you want to go away for the weekend or a week, you could fit enough luggage in here. Especially being a hatch, you can fold the back seats down so it's a flat surface. So you can fit a surprising amount in here. And this is a 1.8 litre, 7-speed DSG automatic with a turbo. Now that's actually quite impressive. A DSG is dual clutch, means it's very snappy on the shifts, and when we get to the interior, I'll show you the paddle shifter as well. It actually makes the driving experience really, really enjoyable. This turbo is fairly small, which means it only makes a small amount of power, 140 kilowatts, but it makes it very snappy. So when you're in day-to-day traffic, if you just want to get going real quick, the low-end torque in this car is great. That's because of the turbo is so small, spools up really quickly, and just gets you going. I love it. This is actually the biggest engine featured in a Polo GTI ever, being the Mark 7. It originally started as a 1.3, then a 1.6, and now a 1.8. But it's actually the closest engine to a Golf we've ever seen. I actually really like this engine. It goes really well for what it is. It makes good power. It's very economic with the fuel, especially because of the gearbox. RPM are always low, but there's always the right gear for the perfect situation. Being a depressing day in Melbourne, it's nice to be in a car like this because it's so comfortable. You know, it's got automatic window wipers, automatic headlights. The headlights are also LED, so you can actually see what the hell's going on in front of you. And the climate control works beautifully. And it's not just in summer, it's also winter. It's got a freezing cold AC and a really nice heater. And that isn't just because it's a modern car, it's also because the cabin's so small. It doesn't take much to heat it up or cool it down, and it stays nice and cool and nice and hot. I'm assuming if you've bought a GTI, you're gonna wanna flog it a bit. This is sport mode and I'm in manual mode. It has the paddles here. I'm in second gear, just rolling onto it. If I ping it, you can actually see it builds up quite nicely. Like, you know, it's enough to put me back in my seat. And that DSG is snappy. And for a 2-litre engine or 1.8 litre engine, it actually sounds, you know, not too bad actually. I actually kind of like it. Taking it around some cornery roads like this, you know, this car does have a traction control button. There's no need to really mess around with it. You mix this car with some nice tyres, it actually goes pretty nicely. Like, you don't really need to flog it, and it doesn't love a flogging, but it's only a Polo. But mixed with this gearbox, it's a light car, it actually handles alright. Now, a car like this, there's no point really flogging it too hard. You've got to remember you're still in a front-wheel drive car. But with the weight of the car and the relatively big wheels and the big brakes, you can actually do a lot of flogging without having to really worry. Like, it's just so comfortable, you know, you don't get car sick, you don't feel like you're driving a boat around. And, you know, a bit of a hill like this, you just roll into it and you're up to speed, no worries. Downshift into a corner, it's totally fine. It goes perfectly well. It's a nice, fun car. Like, it is a Polo, but the GTI Turbo, it actually goes alright. You know, it's not a slow car by any means. This is more than enough speed for most people, you know. You don't really need much more than this. You don't need a Golf. It's not like You don't drive this and feel like, damn, I wish I had a bigger engine like a Golf. You know, there's nothing really more else to gain out of that. It's nice and chill and rewarding to drive, as much as a Golf can be anyway. For most of Polo's life, as I enter a freeway, it's known as a car that can barely even keep up with traffic. It's slow. You know, that's one of the bad parts of driving it, is that part of having to worry about just traffic, being the smallest car on the road. With this type of Polo, getting up to highway speeds is not as much of an issue. That's 100 kilometers an hour, effortless, and I was rolling onto that. I was wringing out the gears, but I wasn't pinning it by any means. That was me rolling onto it, and you're up to speed instantly. And that's the benefit that a GTI brings you. It's sportiness in that sense. You get a nicer interior, but a more refined engine and gearbox. As we sit on the freeway, I'm doing 80 kilometers an hour, which is about, 45 miles an hour. I'm currently sitting at 1400 RPM in 7th gear, cruising, getting about 6 litres per 100 kilometers. Really good fuel economy. It's quiet, it's comfortable. You know, Australia is known for their rubbish roads. This old freeway is a perfect example, but in a car like this, you know, it's not as bad as other cars I've driven. It's really nice, comfortable, and forgiving. So that brings me on to the question, should you actually buy a Polo over a Golf, or just a Polo GTI in general? Now, if we're talking Volkswagen Polos in general, no, I don't actually like Polos. But if we're talking about the GTI model, I think for dollar, it is hard to beat as far as it comes. Being a 2016, it's actually fairly new, it's very safe, it's very quiet, the build quality is actually really good, they've known to be reliable as well, and a lot of money has been put into this, and it shares a lot with the Golf, which is actually a really good car. Now, maybe if you asked me 3 years ago when car prices were a bit more normal, I'd maybe say go for a Golf and spend the extra money. But it's 2023, and Mark 7 Golfs are now 30 grand at least for an entry-level one. That makes this Polo GTI an amazing car for the price. Like I said, 19,000 Australian dollars is very, very hard to beat. Now, in saying that, this obviously isn't the car for everyone. It is still small, which is something to consider. You couldn't fit 3 adults in the back comfortably. It'd be definitely squashed. And it is a compact car. The Golf is already notorious for being a compact car. This is even smaller. But if you're not worried about the small size and you're happy to get better fuel economy with the smaller engine, and just want something a bit sportier and nice in the interior, go for it. It's a great car. Some other cars in that price range would be a 1 Series BMW, but you'd be looking at a much older version rather than a 2016. Other cars are maybe Mazda 3s. A Mazda 3 you could get a 2014 for around this price. Its interior is not going to be near as nice, but they might be a bit more reliable. So if you want something really nice and get that German luxury, go for a Polo GTI. You're spending $11,000 more for a Golf that's comparable. And honestly, for that $11,000 more, you got to really ask yourself, what are you really getting extra? I will be the first one to say a Golf GTI has one of the best aftermarkets I've ever seen as far as support for modifications and just general everything, communities, rather than a Polo. And maybe Polos have a bit of a reputation as well with the drivers. But realistically, I think for the money, a Polo GTI, it's one of the best value cars on the market right now.